Hello and welcome to Gambit Chess Book Reviews. Today I'm going to look at a book sent to me by Grandmaster Murray Chandler. On the cover is a young man who is well known to us all. It is in fact the world champion, Magnus Carlsen. I also found this, which is a little flyer advertising some of their earlier books. Some of these I'd like to think are still in print, and those that aren't you should seek out, because you can always find things online or whatever. And on the back it gives some titles, which is useful. It says see www.gambitbooks, all one word, .com for over 160 chess books in print. So I think in a way that's answered the question, hasn't it? I'll just show you that again. There you go. Now the book I want to look at is a book, this guy. Now rather than just rushing into this, I've had this for about 5-6 weeks. I got out my other books. There's always the feeling that when somebody, since the chess world moves faster now than it did before, quicker clock times, but also, you know what I mean, time scale, that nowadays books are sort of rushed out. Well, here we have an enormous book on Magnus Carlsen by Andrew Soltis, which I've had for quite some time, and it's a Batsford. And I've been through this, making comparisons with this. I've been through this book I didn't warm to. Union Chess is not my favourite publisher, though I'm sure they're highly competent, but there he is. And I haven't been able to find a single game which is in this new book and the older editions. I contacted John Upham, who knows far more about these things than I do, particularly nowadays, and he got out his book Carlsen Move by Move by Lakdawala, and also Wonder Boy by Simon Agerstein, and also How Magnus Carlsen Became the Youngest GM in the World, which is, as with the Agerstein and New Chess book. We went through them with me calling out the opponent's name and a little bit of information about when they played. Do you know what? We couldn't find any duplication. Magnus is a prolific competitor, and in a way could be better. Now, from what I think to what I'm looking at here, Magnus Carlsen is the greatest chess player of the 21st century. I am in no position to argue with that opinion. His tactical wizardry, strategic inventiveness, technical expertise, and legendary fighting spirit put him head and shoulders above all other players. They also make his games tremendously instructive. To extract the best lessons from his amazing source material, Gambit, that's the publisher, has commissioned, now I run into a problem here, I can't pronounce his name, Martyn Kravtsiv, a Ukrainian Grandmaster from the same generation as Carlsen. In fact, they were born just a few days apart, and that's rather nice, because Carlsen is in his early 30s. He has annotated 42 games from a thoroughly modern perspective, with an innate understanding of the impact of Carlsen's play has had on modern chess. In each game, he picks out key points, the Magnus moment, where Carlsen demonstrates the special insight that sets him apart from other players. Perhaps he clarifies a messy situation, confident in his technical ability, or sacrifices to gain principal chances in a game that has not gone according to plan. You all know that feeling. Throughout, the emphasis is on Carlsen making life hard for his opponents, if in any way he can, whatever the objective assessment of the position on the board. Each game is a themed lesson in an important chess topic. The bulk of the book addresses the fight for advantage and initiative. In the middle game, there are also chapters focusing on opening ideas, endgame play, and human factors. Now, obviously, at the moment, and for some considerable time, the world's eyes are on Ukraine, but it's quite by chance that the Grandmaster author is from Lviv. I can't say, can I? Lviv. His tournament results include tied first place in Kapell, that I can pronounce, and the Ukrainian Championships in 2015. He's represented the country in 2017 World Team Championships, that's the Olympiad, and is a coach to the silver medalist in the 2016 Olympiad. And it just shows at the bottom there some more books by the same publisher. Right, well, I'm going to dive in now and have a look through. The first point, which is an important one, at least to me, is that it really is beautifully printed. There are some books which are a little bit of a hodgepodge, and there's also books which aren't a little bit of a hodgepodge, but contain glaring areas of format. But here, no. It's got certain sections, 4 sections: human factors, endgame play, positional and strategic chess, counterplay, defense, attacking play. That's under the heading of the generic heading of middle game topics. And the first 4 games are brought together under opening themes. There's an introduction with quite small text. I'm sure you can manage that. There we are. I'm not going to plow all through that. I mean, I have read it, but I'm not going to reread it, if you see what I mean. A list of symbols. I mean, obviously, it's not like Informator where everything is a symbol. The game's annotated in prose and in very nice English. And the book has been translated, I think, by Graham Burgess, who was edited by Graham Burgess, typeset by Petra Nunn, cover photograph by Graham Burgess, and was printed in Cornwall, which I always enjoy saying is possibly near to where John Nunn and Petra now live. The very first game is a Portuguese Gambit. Now, this is the first of a small number of minor complaints I have about this book. They don't use Rabar indexes. I wish they did. And they don't name the opening in the heading, in the header. Once again, this is hardly anything to be a deal breaker, but I just think it's a shame, because some people like me, it would be helpful. The notes are succinct, I would say, without unnecessary verbiage. They don't give any more complete games. You know, you can say where you can just press a button on your computer and it'll spew out all sorts of things. And this is presented entirely systematically and consistently. And for example, on this page, look, you've got 3 diagrams. Well, that's doable, isn't it? But it's nice to have that. And people say you can follow it without a set. Or maybe you can follow it without a set. I can't, but nevertheless. And it asks you, and it gives up a couple of paragraphs, what can we learn from the game? The game clearly shows how dangerous it can be to be behind in development. Yes. After white captures the second pawn, the situation on the board immediately becomes critical. It seems to me that white underestimated black's threats because of the Scandinavian defense is a rare opening that many players underestimate and so divert little time to it. I'm not sure if that's true at club level, but that's as may be. Don't expect to be spoon-fed by this book. It is, it's on a respectable and respected level, but I think players of all strengths, and I can't say that about that many books, would get something out of it. I'm not a strong player, never pretended to be, but working through these and looking through the examples, I was immediately impressed. There's a game here which they've inserted. Here's an excerpt from one of my own games where I fell victim to these tendencies, failing to be vigilant and playing hastily. And it's in fact, he shows again the Scandinavian, as they call it, the centre counter. Game 2, he plays a Sicilian. You'll get a lot of Sicilians. And Magnus is very wide-ranging opening repertoire. No one since Larsen probably plays more systems one way and another. But similarly, as he gets older, I imagine he will become more of a specialist. That's a guess. Here's a note. Even though almost the whole of Black's army is still on the board, he has no good way to protect the e7 pawn. The only way to parry the mate threat is by sacrificing his rook to distract the bishop from d5. So if they're talking about distracting a rook, they are putting it in language that we can all understand, and it doesn't blind us with science. He doesn't, in fact, put in any notation. He just simply explains the idea, and that's good. I think that's the way it should be. But there are some long technical notes, of course there are. And here's one that takes up half a page. Again, I'll show the camera. There you are, from there all the way down the page, and here all the way down to there. I mean, that's a lot. And you're going to play through all those sub-variations. If you did, credit to you, and if you don't, it won't spoil your enjoyment. And as dear old B.H. Wood used to say, use a second set. So get out your Portlands. Notice how important the f7 pawn was. Yes, we all enjoy attacks on f7 and also on f2, don't we? In open positions, it's very risky to leave the king in the centre, even though there's no direct attack and there's some pawn cover. Not for too long, it doesn't, if you're playing someone that likes whisking these pieces off. And here we have an example. This is quite in the Baku Olympiad of 2016. Carlsen plays 1e3. It's this rather slow line. He follows it up with playing a fairly bog standard English. In fact, it goes into a Queen's Indian, but because Black fianchetto's the Queen Bishop. But for all of that, it's nice to see something unusual. And here's a reference to a game by dear old Gligerich from Montilla 1978. So it's nice to see some older references. What can we learn from the game? Again, it gives a structured and, as we work through the book, slightly more predictable format. Broadly speaking, Black lost this game in the opening. He failed to bring his pieces to good squares and allowed White too firm a grip in the centre. Yes, he has a broad centre with pawns on d4, c4, e3. Nothing revolutionary there. I mean, we can all do that, but it's a question of how you follow it up. Even after he got into difficult position, Black could have fought harder for activity. Magnus is not one to falter when basically given an open goal. In other words, it's not just a question of calculation, it's also a question of timing. Here's a game against Karyakin, who he played a World Championship match against, so far as I'm aware. And it's a pelican, but it doesn't say it's a pelican. I think that's a bit of a shame. I'll come on to talk about the opening index. What can we learn from this game? In my opinion, Carlsen won this game primarily because he was a much better prepared in the opening. If you realize that you are facing a very well-prepared opponent, it makes sense to simplify the position. Well, that's the first topic, and they're talking about openings, and they don't talk that much about openings. I mean, that is 23 pages, although it's beautifully put together, structured. It's nevertheless 23 pages is not the lion's share of this book, which hang on. It's 174 pages. This is the middle game topics. I read out the contents list just now, didn't I? Here we are in English. Carlsen playing, it's in fact a 4 knights, possibly a reverse Sicilian. Two diagrams on a page, 2 diagrams on that page, 3 diagrams on that page, and 1 at the end. And once again, the author gives narrative text as opposed to simply, it is slightly strange for black to decide to put his pawns on the advanced color squares of the white bishop. In other words, he explains it and uses a minimum of notation. There's an enormous amount here, but not in that case. So if you wanted to skip over it, and we all do that, or if you wanted to play over it on your board, you could work it out what he was talking about, as opposed to simply what Carlsen did, which after all would be in any straightforward database. Black clearly underestimated White's attack, it says. After all, he could have hit the emergency button with 17 F5. Even if you've got a lost position, don't give up hope. Yes. Attack on the wing. Here we are in Sicilian, except it's a closed Sicilian, with black playing c5, obviously the characteristic move, d6 and then e5, and putting a clamp on the center. I quite often end up with that on my games, in my games. That Carlsen just copies my ideas. What do you learn? Remember that if you are trying to solve strategic problems by tactical means, you need to calculate the variations very carefully. Let that be written in letters a mile high on your chess club wall. White's problem started with a loosening advance. Here's a game against the very famous Ding Liren, and this is a Lopez. And it's a rapid play. Nowadays, games with all time limits are mixed in. At one time, that probably wouldn't have happened. I mean, in 60 memorable games, Bobby does quote one blitz game against Reuben Fine, and that's possibly because Fine had given up chess a long time before the game. It was an Evans Gambit. Was played, and that's all he had. He wouldn't have faced Dr. Fine in any other time limit or event. It was just a friendly game. There's no just about it where Bobby Fischer was concerned. Of course, the same applies to Carlsen. A section on badly placed pieces. All chess players are familiar with situations where a piece is poorly placed. For example, a knight on a5 might not be able to return to c6 because of White's pawn on d5. Can you follow that? Or a king might be exposed to checks. The following game took an outwardly very different course, but the fundamental problem was similar. I think it's quite interesting that the introductions, I mean, Larry Evans in 60 Memorable Games, which was the first advanced chess book I ever read over 50 years ago. I can't wait to try and understand it. Wink, wink. Gives a fairly sort of slangy intro, almost as if he's trying to sell the game to you, like, hey, this is real great, you know, you're going to really get a load of this. But here I think we're probably not a more restrained country. Maybe chess has grown up a little bit since that time. Bobby was grown up. Larry Evans was grown up too, so I'm not being rude about them. But I think that the literary style, which Faber may have wanted for the book, would jar these days. And this is far more in keeping, far more up to date than hitherto. When we calculate variations, it is easy to think too mechanically. I take, he retakes. I attack, he moves away. Bobby Fischer, talk of the devil, was particularly adept at refuting the intentions of his opponents. Zwischenzugs, that means in-between moves, go unnoticed. And there's two Zwischenzugs here. And there's a game again played in Baden-Baden, or even Baden-Baden, if you prefer land of Baden. It's a Grunfeld. Oh. There we are. Here we have the wretched London system, I'm calling it that. 100 years ago, possibly to the year, it was first played. And little did the people know that it was to become so popular. This is from Reich&Z 2016. It says, in my opinion, the following game is one of Carlsen's very finest games. Wow, that's quite a statement, isn't it? And it's against Tomaszewski. Here's a game from a rapid play. What can we learn from the game? Once again, he sets out 4 points. It is impressive how Magnus was able to generate kingside attack. Exchange of queens is often the last hope for the defending side, but you need to assess the position that will arise after their exchange carefully. In other words, when the music has stopped, has the music stopped? When the fire has gone out, are the flames quenched? These are interesting, and I hope for you, no matter what your level of chess, not too overwhelming. I'm skipping ahead. Here we have a chapter on defense. All of the games given, by the way, are complete. They're not bits and bobs. But it is clearly a book which deals in a structured manner, and that the themes are presented separately. So if you felt that you needed help in defense, if you needed help in opening variations, particularly those which are popular nowadays in the faster time limit games, this is the book to get. Protecting a weakness, defending. I was impressed by the move. Magnus just reinforced the b2 pawn. The simple-looking move stalled all of black's threats. In other words, he was on his mettle, wasn't he? Counterplay. As early as move 3, Svidler plays something unusual, queen to b3 in English, hitting the bishop, which has come to b4, somewhat prematurely. I don't like that. Just my bias. Play on opposite wings. The Grunfeld, queen a5, and a kingside fianchetto. The RAF used to say, hit them where they ain't. I'm going to scan ahead here. Positional and strategic chess. Gaining space and what to do with it. Yes, we can all gain space, can't we? And you often think, well, I suppose it increases the options, the flexibility of the position, because you've got more space, and therefore you can maneuver around if you want to and feel the need. Here we have a time-honoured bishop's opening. Beloved of Bent Larsen, and as I always like to say, and Bill Hartson as well. But it doesn't say that. A Petrov. There's a little bit of discussion. This is one of the traditional lines of the Petrov. It certainly is. There's no worry that white has sought to change the scenery completely. However, it is good to be predictable. I suppose it is. Even weak players can be looked up on. Games are on display in databases, aren't they? Here we have a Mike Basman, a bishop e2 against the Sicilian. This is something which has been revived. I should really have spoken to Michael. I know him quite well. I know him very well. And pulled his leg about this. It's not a very lively system. It's a bit timid. But I mean, these people can make something out of nothing, can't they? That's called genius. Exerting pressure on a weakness. Fighting for space. Again, we've dealt with that. It's a French defense. And Carlsen has played an exchange variation, then followed up with c4. I've played millions of Frenches, and I've had that thrown against me a few times. I think if a very strong player played it against me, I think I would be worried, but you know, if that was his specialty. Here we have a Berlin defense, which you knew was coming up. No point in this does it have photographs. In no point in this does it have gimmickry. In no point in this book are there cross tables, match tables. You are looking at chess in its slightly more academic and not wildly so setting. For bishop b4 check. A move recommended to me by a very dear friend, Ken Harman, so long ago, and at last the Grandmasters have picked up on it. Strategic exchange sacrifices. And here we have a bit of fantasy. Dinglieren versus Carlsen from Reich-Ense, and at move 2, Carlsen plays b5. So we are on the verge of irregularity. Of course we are. Positional endgame play, chapter 3, against Driv, one of the most solid Russian grandmasters ever. He's always there or thereabouts, as good old Driv. I'll get told off for saying Driv and say you have to say Driv or something. Very well, I will do so. Here's a Bogo Indian, but it doesn't say that it is, with a5. I used to quite like that. Paul Alford used to play it as well. I think I copied him. Scotch. Sort of a Benko Gambit with white pieces. 6a3. Pawns go to c5 and d4, and you play b4, and the c pawn takes the b pawn instead of recapturing, which is perfectly okay. You play a3, offering up a gambit. If he takes it, more for him, you get good piece play, pressure from the wings, and hopefully pressure from the unmoved rook on a1, which suddenly comes alive. This is called Human Factors, one of the latter chapters. Talking about psychology, I'm sure, and factors, things which can rear their ugly heads. Let's face it, sitting at the chessboard long enough. In most games, the relatively small number of important moments which outcome of the game is decided. Yes, that's true enough. Game 42, so there you are, this may be. And then we have a Magnus moment, which is a nice way of remembering the important. So if you haven't got time to play over the whole game at the moment, you can nevertheless enjoy. Now, here's something I'm going to pull Murray Chandler's leg about. We have a list of opponents and we have a list of openings which Carlsen played, but the opponents where the bold numbering has come in, Carlsen was black, but in the openings the number is given, but it doesn't say what color Carlsen was, and it could easily have done so. So if you look there, see the top one, we have some figures emboldened, but down here we don't, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, no lives are lost. Well, there we are. I very much hope you will give this book your time. It is $21, nearly $22, but the English price is about £17, I think. And I like it very much. It says, unlocking the lessons from the world's best chess player. I've been James Pratt. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Gambit. Bye-bye.